Hey y'all, welcome back to Drawditions, and today we're going to be doing the third and what I think is the final type of video format on this channel, where I will be taking two universes and shoving them together. Remember, if you want to see your submission or your ideas, like, subscribe, and most importantly, leave a comment asking for what you want. Anyway, let's get into it. So, as y'all can probably see from the reference pictures, the universes we're going to be smashing together today are Star Wars and Transformers. And, as you've seen from the last two videos, the way I usually format these are with a little bit of lore at the beginning, and then I go into design notes. Now, I have a general idea for the lore of this one, but I didn't think super in depth for the lore, so what I have to say about that is if y'all like this drawing and want to see me do another Star Wars vehicle as a Transformer, then I can smooth out the lore a little bit, but for now I basically just have a general idea of how the Cybertronians got there, or like why they're there, and it's kind of like almost a little bit of a subplot, like a side story. And I guess, let's just get into that. Okay, here's my idea how this kind of collision of universes happened. Now, for the sake of this, obviously there's a few renditions I'm going to be making to the lore. For the most obvious one being that the Star Wars universe and the Transformers universe exist side by side. Anyway, let's get into this. So, my idea was, most of the Autobots fled on the Ark, and most of the Decepticons, or actually not even most of them, but a lot of Decepticons chased them on the Nemesis. Well, not all the Autobots left on the Ark, we know that. Some stayed on the planet, but most found alternative means off the planet, and one of the ways they did that was like escape pods, and what I thought is that one Autobot in particular, the one that's currently being drawn, I don't actually have a name for him, so if you guys can think of a name in the comments, that'd be great. But anyway, one Autobot in particular, after decades of drifting around, maybe even centuries of drifting in the escape pod, he ended up in the Star Wars universe, where he was, where he scanned a X-Wing and hid on a rebel base. A few Decepticon bounty hunters, or not even technically Decepticons, just Cybertronian bounty hunters, paid by Decepticons to hunt down Autobots, also found their way to the Star Wars galaxy and scanned some Imperial vehicles. After this Autobot revealed himself to the Rebel Alliance, the Rebels and himself essentially agreed to work together, and he put up a beacon for more Autobots to find their way. The Autobots that arrived scanned some of the, Y-Wings, A-Wings, more X-Wings, U-Wings, all the Rebel stuff. Heck, I even thought of an idea of, there are big Cybertronians, like giant ones, like Metroplex, but I don't know why they're so big, and I don't know if there's, like, a limited number of them, so not gonna say that there's any that can transform into, like, a Mon Calamari ship or a Star Destroyer, but I maybe thought of kind of doing a reverse combiner, where rather than them combining into a giant robot that has no alt mode, they don't have an alt mode on their own, but combine together into a giant alt mode, that being either the Mon Calamari ships or a Star Destroyer. And basically, the Rebel Alliance and the Cybertronians teamed up, realizing how both could benefit from each other's help, while the Decepticons and the Empire never truly teamed up, rather both were looking for ways to manipulate the other one and reap the benefits. an interesting idea I had was that there's a pretty low chance that Energon would exist in the Star Wars galaxy. So I had the idea that Kyber crystals actually work as an alternative to Energon. And I think this is an okay thing to say because, synthetic Energon is actually a thing in Transformers. So to assume that there is a way to create alternative power sources isn't all that out there. So I think the idea of Kyber crystals being used to power the Autobots and Decepticons is honestly really interesting and explains why not only do they take the shape of Star Wars vehicles, but are then able to use the same weapons. Now, I know obviously not all weapons, like not every blaster in Star Wars has a Kyber crystal in it, right? Kyber crystals are pretty much exclusively in lightsabers and were used in the Death Star, right? But my point is still kind of there because they have like Energon blades in Transformers, but here they would have a more plasma-based, Kyber crystal-powered blade. Anyway, that's really... I don't have anything like super defined for this story right now. If you guys want me to do another one of these, like if you want me to take, for example, a Transformer, make a TIE Fighter Transformer, or like even one of the bigger ones I mentioned, like a Star Destroyer Transformer, which would actually be like a group of Transformers that combine for the alt mode, like I said. But just, if you want to see something like that, then I guess I could flesh out the lore a little bit more, give these guys names, and give it a proper story. But for right now, I think just the general concept is okay. Anyway, how about we get into the design notes now? Okay, so for the design, I feel like the pose is really lackluster, and I've said this before, and like I think I said this in the first video, but I'm not good with poses. I don't know how to do them. I don't know how to make them feel dynamic, and I think that I just didn't do that here. And maybe if it was a better pose, I'd like it a little bit more. I don't actually have a major problem with the design. This was kind of a trust the process one for me though, because at the beginning I didn't love it. I don't really know why, but I just didn't. And there's a few things I would like to have done better. For example, the arms, if anyone here has ever seen the show Transformers Prime, they went a really interesting direction with Soundwave. Like, it wasn't the usual take on his design, but he had these really interesting thin arms that were like his wings spaced apart, his wings alt mode spaced apart, and I thought that was really cool. And because the X-Wing has really thin wings and it has two pairs of wings, I thought that it made sense for one pair of wings to be on their back, like a lot of flyers do or I think if they're a Decepticon, they're called Seekers. But like a lot of them do in Transformers. But I thought it made sense for the other arms to be his other pair of wings. And if you actually look in the top left, you can see at the beginning of the video, I did a bunch of red lines, which was just me trying to process how a Transformer how an X-Wing would transform. And I think that actually really helped, like, especially with like the actual color palette. Like it really helped determine where colors should be. And also just the shape of things. For example, the things popping up at the back on X-Wing engines are kind of weird, they're not weird, they look like they should for an X-Wing, but they would be a little weird if I just left them normally. I used the engines as the shoulder because that's just I was drawing from reference pictures of multiple, there's only one on screen, but I was drawing from multiple reference pictures of flying Transformers, and most of them have the engines on the shoulders. So I just thought that made sense. But the thing about Star Wars, the X-Wing thrusters, that they go back a lot, and that would just be kind of weird and would be unbalanced. So I just flipped the back part up, and I actually think that is pretty good because it kind of frames the head in a way. It's almost like the head is completely surrounded. So I think that's cool. I think I could have done the guns better, but honestly, I think it's fine. Kind of did a Starscream thing there where he has the mounted rockets, but instead it's the X-Wing guns. The coloring for this was kind of weird because I was constantly having the idea that that there should be more red, but by the end I actually think I did the red pretty good. As for highlights, which is what's going on the screen right now, obviously as a Transform and obviously as an X-Wing, this should be just very metallic in nature because the whole thing should be made of metal. So when I was trying to do the highlights, I was just like basically doing just make it shiny around the edges, and I actually really like the shading on this one. I feel like this was just kind of one of my more okay drawings, and then I did the shading, and I feel like the shading just really helped this one. Let's see. Oh, one of the big things, right? Part of the reason I did this video was because at one point there was a Star Wars Transformers kind of, not crossover, but the toys did a crossover where there was like a bunch of vehicles that would transform into characters from Star Wars, but they didn't look all that great, and part of the thing was because they transformed into characters from Star Wars, they didn't really look like Transformers in robot mode. So I wanted to kind of take a more traditional Transformers approach with this. So what I did for the head was, as you may have noticed, like halfway through the video, a X-Wing pilot helmet appears in the bottom right, and pretty blatantly the helmet or the head of this Autobot is based on the X-Wing pilot helmet, but then has the faceplate that a lot of Transformers have. And also I switched out the orange tinted visor for a blue one because most of the Autobots have glowing blue eyes. Meanwhile, the Decepticons have glowing, red eyes. Or purple. Those kind of vary sometimes. But I think that was just a really nice way to do a head for this thing. And I really was just paying attention to how this thing would, as I said, I was paying attention to how this thing would transform. So hopefully if you look at this long enough, you can see where everything would go. Like you can see how the thing would transform back into an X-Wing. Because I did my best to try and make sure all the pieces were there. There are two engines that are missing, but at the same time, not really, because there's been multiple versions of X-Wings, and some of them had it where it was like a half engine on each wing, and they combined into like a full engine kind of thing. Whereas the picture I took had, 4 engines, which I think the 4 engines is the more traditional look compared to the half engine on each wing. But honestly, you could just say the half engine is why there's only 2. But also on Transformers, sometimes pieces of the vehicles kind of just disappear inside of the Transformer. So I'm kind of just assuming that either it's the half engine or that there's 2 in there. Anyway, I did really enjoy drawing this. I had a lot of fun doing it, and I hope you guys enjoyed. And once again, if you want to see something else like this, just leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see y'all next time.